Hi there, welcome to the channel. This is Payneful Pages. I really hope you enjoy your stay here, however long that might be. So I made this channel for a place for me to talk a little bit about the books that I enjoy reading, such as some horror books, some manga, and of course, that goes without saying, some horror manga. Now, I started reading about a year ago at the point of this recording, so December 2024. I hadn't read in about a decade outside of the odd manga here and there, and as you can probably see, if you're rather keen-eyed, most of those series on those shelves behind me are not complete and are a few volumes at the most. I have an awful habit of starting a new series, reading a few volumes, and then just moving on to the next thing, especially if it's one that I've seen the anime. So I started reading again about a year ago, like I said, sort of proper books, quote unquote, sort of like fiction and things like that. And I've been absolutely loving it. I think I've read something like 25 books in that year, which for a lot of you is probably not a lot, but for somebody, like me who's been chronically online for like the last decade, and hasn't picked up a proper book in sort of 10 years. It's quite an achievement for me. Shows how much I've been enjoying it as well. And yeah, I've started this channel to sort of not necessarily keep myself motivated, but give me a place to talk about these things. Sometimes it can be quite hard to keep up a hobby when you don't have a place to talk about it or someone to talk to about it. So it also kind of holds me accountable a little bit as well. So I'm hoping to make videos on books I plan reading each month, things like that, and hopefully sort of hold me accountable to that a little bit. And actually get through some of the books that I've got to read, as opposed to buying loads more and making the TBR pile infinitely bigger. But as I'm sure most of you are aware, that's easier said than done. So yeah, I'm very much just going into this to see how it sort of evolves over time. I thought I'd start with sort of the classic end of year video. My favourite books that I've read this year. I believe I've got 5 or 6 of them in the pile. So we'll move on to the top books of the last year for me. Sorry about the rambling intro. I used to do a little bit of streaming here and there, but it's been a long time since I've just spoken to a camera, so I do apologise if it was a little bit incoherent at times and I just repeated myself. I have a tendency to do that quite a bit. But like I said, we'll move on to the my top books of 2025. I'll start with an honourable mention because it wasn't this year. It was the sort of book that got me back into reading in December 2024. I had a long coach journey that I needed to be on and just randomly decided to pick up a couple of books. And this was one of the ones I got, and it's the first one I read, and it kind of hooked me. And since then, I've sort of not looked back. So I kind of owe my getting back into the hobby to this book. And that book is The Watchers by A.M. Shine. Now, I loved this book. Maybe it was because it was just the first one I'd read in like 10 years, so naturally I didn't have anything to sort of compare it to. And it was kind of the first horror book I think I'd ever read. Up until recently, I've never really been that much into horror films or books, really. But I don't know why, something had just clicked in my brain. I just decided that's what I wanted to read, so that's what I got. And I really enjoyed this one. So this one follows Mina, who is a Irish woman set in Ireland. I think all of A.M. Shine's books are set in Ireland. The 2 that I've read are, at least. And so Mina's story starts with having to deliver a golden parrot, I think it was, when a car breaks down on the edge of a forest, an uncharted forest, unmapped. Doesn't seem to be on any maps. And in freezing temperatures overnight, she decides the best thing to do is to go into the forest. And she ends up, through a few different circumstances, finding her way to this sort of remote concrete building alongside 3 other sort of survivors, characters. And it turns out that in that forest there are these weird entities called the Watchers, which come out at night. And therefore, these 4 people are trapped in this sort of secluded building in the middle of this forest. Now, you would think, well, why can't they just disappear from that forest in the day? But it turns out that it's too far to travel in the day. So the people that have tried to escape previously that have ended up here have never come back. So the story goes through sort of multiple POVs of each of the characters, which I really enjoyed. I know some people don't enjoy that quite so much from what I've seen, the sort of bouncing around of it, but I really enjoy it. I think it gives you a bit of a closer look at the sort of relationship development from different points of view, and also gives you an opportunity to see a little bit more into each character's sort of psyche as time goes on. It is quite a bit of time that passes within the book. And yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I thought the twist was pretty okay. It didn't feel too shoehorned in, too forced. And the ending sort of set up the sequel quite nicely. I haven't read that, but I do plan on reading that this year, called Stay in the Light. But I am a little bit unsure of how that's going to go, because the ending does kind of make it feel a little bit like that book's not going to be quite the same in the sort of slow, tense feel of it. But yeah, I really enjoyed The Watchers. Like I said, it was a bit of an honourable mention, because it technically wasn't in 2025, but you'll have to forgive me on that one. So the next one, so the first one actually on 2025, is a book called Hex by Thomas Oldhoyvelt. I believe I've pronounced that correctly. I do have to apologise if I have got that wrong. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Well, I enjoyed all the books on this list, but this one, in the original novel, is set in the Netherlands. Thomas Oldhoyvelt is Dutch. But for the translated version, some of the plot was changed, and the town was actually changed to a place called Black Spring in New York. New York State, that is. Whereas, like I said, the original one is actually set in the Netherlands. I would be quite interested to see how they differ because of that. But from what I have seen, the localization of it does work quite smoothly, and doesn't really affect the overall sort of plot or story at all. But basically, the town of Black Spring is haunted by an entity called the Black Rock Witch, who is a 17th century woman who sort of walks around the town, haunting it, but both her eyes and her mouth are sewn shut. And all of the town folk are made very clear to them that they can't remove those stitches, and something terrible would happen if they did that. Now, the town uses kind of like a high-tech surveillance system to sort of track her movements and make sure that nobody outside the town finds out about her, which is kind of almost comedy relief at times, which is quite nice, actually, because the book is very, very creepy. And I think he does a really good job at sort of bringing that kind of classic town haunted story, but to like the modern era where they do have all this technology and people can just be walking around with like phone cameras and stuff. But yeah, the other sort of big point of the town is that people that once you move there, you can never move out. Not just because you might tell other people, you know, sort of what's going on, but when you actually leave the town, the longest you can leave is for like a few days, because you start to get really dark thoughts. I won't go into any more detail than that. I would recommend you read the book to find out more. But it's really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I think it's really creepy. I think there's a good amount of sort of comedic relief that doesn't feel out of place as well. We follow a few different characters of different ages as well, which is quite nice. There's a bit of a sort of twist partway through, which surprised me, because I sort of felt like I knew where it was going, but turns out I didn't. And there is a sequel to it. I don't really know anything about it, but it's called Oracle, or Oracle. And I'm planning on reading that this year, or next year, sorry, 2026. But yeah, I really enjoyed Hex. I have read Hoyvelt's one of his other books, Echo, which is also good, but definitely not as good as Hex, for sure. And that's why I didn't make the list, and Hex did. So we'll move on to the next one. So my fourth favourite book of the last year, which is also a classic, and that is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I didn't really have any plans to read this initially. Obviously, I'd heard of it. You know, it's one of those ones, a bit like The Exorcist and things like that, where you've heard of it. whether you know much about it or not, it's a different matter. But I just randomly saw it in a shop one day and just decided to pick it up. Again, I was traveling, and the sort of smallish size of it, sort of, I was like, actually, that's not too much of a commitment. I'm going to read that. What is it? 246 pages. So yeah, I just picked it up, read it whilst I was traveling, and yeah, really, really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of sort of psychological horror, especially in video games. That's kind of my favorite genre of horror games, and I think is quickly becoming my favorite sort of genre of book as well. So you probably know about the story, but I'll just give my little overview anyway. But the story revolves around four people who have been sort of invited to a notoriously haunted mansion called Hill House, to sort of take part in a paranormal investigation, or supernatural investigation, I guess. The story centered around a young woman named Eleanor. Well, she's 32, I believe, in the story, but sort of her personality gives her a much sort of younger feel than that. It feels like sort of late teens, maybe early 20s. She's lived a very sort of isolated life for one reason or another, which I won't go into. In case you haven't read the book, I highly recommend that you do go and read it. But the story sort of takes us through her mental decline over the sort of the days that she spends at this house. A lot of very like dreamlike sequences where both us and Eleanor are not really sure if this is real or not and what's going on. I really enjoyed those. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, where it's kind of even was right up until the ending. You kind of don't know at times what's real and what's not. You almost can't trust what's happening in the book because Eleanor is a really unreliable narrator because of her clear mental state. But yeah, I won't go into any more detail. If you've read the book, which most of you probably will have done, you'll know about it. But if you haven't, I do really, really recommend going to read it. I really enjoyed that one. So moving on to my third favourite book, which actually I'm putting two in one because I read them back to back. But that is Bird Box and the sequel, Mallory. I've never seen the film. And actually, after reading the book, I can't imagine how the film would go, and I am very interested to watch it. I do know the film is obviously very popular, it's done very well on Netflix and that sort of thing. But after reading it, like I said, I think it works much better as a book. But then I haven't seen the film, but I just can't imagine it working as well as a film. So it takes place, the first one takes place sort of in two timelines. The present and through flashbacks, showing how the main character Mallory sort of has ended up in the situation she's in, where she's sort of planning to take a 20-mile boat journey along a river whilst blindfolded the entire time. That's bad enough. That sounds awful. But it takes us back to the sort of the beginning of events in which sort of an unknown entity has arrived, supposedly. That's kind of what you assume, that's what the characters assume, where anyone who sees them sort of turns incredibly aggressive and violent, resulting in them ending themselves, shall we say, in very violent and aggressive manners. And yeah, Bird Box is obviously incredibly popular. The film was very popular, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I think the having it where people can't look outside at all without through fear of seeing one of these entities or whatever it is that's causing people to go mad works really well as a book, because obviously we can't see anything at all. So our imagination is pulled along by Mallory's imagination, and that's the only sort of information we get as to the surroundings and what's going on outside, and I think it works really, really well. But I actually preferred the sequel. I preferred Mallory more, which I think is probably an uncommon experience given what people seem to have said about each book and the sort of ratings of the books as well. But I don't know why. I'm not entirely sure why I enjoyed the second one more. I think it's because it takes more of a look into kind of what's happened to society in this sort of, almost post-apocalyptic world. It takes a little bit more of a look into the lives of Mallory's children that were born during this, almost kind of towards the beginning of in the first year of this event. And I think in the book they're about 14 in this book. They're about 14. And so it takes a little bit of a deeper look into what their lives would be like, spending their entire life in this new world, as it were. But also the relationship they have with their mother, Mallory, and kind of from her point of view, what it means to be a mother in this kind of world, which I think is really interesting. And yeah, it's sort of a little bit more sort of uncovering the mystery of what's going on, and how society has kind of evolved in these like nearly 15 years since it began. So yeah, I really enjoyed Mallory. I thought it was better than the first one personally, but like I said, I think that's an uncommon opinion. But I highly recommend reading them both if you haven't. So my second favorite book of the year, which again is potentially a little bit controversial. I don't quite know why. The book's not rated that high in comparison to my enjoyment of it. I believe I gave this 5-star, but then it was one of the first ones I read this year, so it might just be, again, like I didn't have anything to compare it to, and that's kind of where my opinion came from. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this, and that is The Luminous Dead. I'm not sure if people kind of feel that maybe it was a bit overhyped on things like Goodreads and stuff, but I really enjoyed it. It is not a slog, but there were times, admittedly, where I was a little bit like, this feels like it's dragging, but also I can't put it down. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I felt. Was that it was kind of, I don't know, but it kind of matches the character's experience though, in a way, which I think, I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I really enjoyed it. It's definitely more sci-fi horror, but it is also psychological horror as well, which again might be why I really enjoyed it. So it follows a young woman called Gaia. I think that's how you say it. Is Gyre. So I imagine it's like Tyre. I don't know. But yeah, so it follows Gaia, who is a sort of, she's a young cave diver on a mining colony planet. So obviously this is some point in the future or alternate universe or something like that. And she's done cave diving there for a long time. Her mother works for a sort of cave diving tech company off-world, and her relationship with her mother and things like that, and is very, very central to the plot, but I won't say anything more than that. I do recommend you read it. But she ends up lying about her cave diving experience in order to get onto a sort of solo diving job for like a faceless corporation. To get onto it, she ends up being equipped with a high-tech sort of diving suit that has to be actually like surgically fitted to her body and controls her body functions, controls her food. It's through like a bag into her stomach and things like that. So that's already kind of a little bit like borderline body horror. It's not that bad, but also it is kind of gross to think about a little bit as well. But yeah, so the story is just fully centered around Gaia throughout her sort of expedition, and her handler M, who sort of turns out to be the only person working on this with her. So they're basically the only two characters that we have any interaction with throughout, outside of the odd little like flashback recording or something like that. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed just having it be the two of them. From what I've seen, some of the sort of like criticism of this is that it is just two people that you interact with throughout the book, but I really enjoyed that. There's a real balance between Gaia's distrust of M, but also coupled with the facts and the knowledge that she's the only person she can rely on. So sort of watching their relationship evolve throughout the book is really interesting. There's a clear power imbalance there as well. So the way their relationship evolves kind of feels realistic to a degree, but also not great as well. That's kind of how I feel about it. Again, I won't say too much, but there's lots to this. There's a lot of like backtracking back and forth throughout the cave and things like that, which kind of, like I said, makes it feel slower. And but that's Gaia's experience in the cave, which so I think it's quite realistic. But yeah, I won't say any more on it. I do think you should go and read it. I think it's a really interesting look into sort of the again, the mental decline of somebody in that situation, and the sort of psychological horror the isolation creates in Gaia. It feels quite realistic, especially when there's like potentially weird inconsistencies that start happening in the cave. But are they actually real? Are they her imagination? Yeah, I'd highly recommend that you go and read it. Luminous Dead, I think, is really, really good, and was my second favourite book that I read this year. And yes, I did just hit myself in the face with this book. So up to the final book, my favourite one of 2025, which I'm pleased to see a lot of people really enjoyed and were surprised by, because I was also really surprised by this book. I didn't expect anything of what happened, and that is When the Wolf Comes Home. Maybe not a surprise if you've read this. It seems to be right at the top of a lot of people's lists this year, and I just didn't know what to expect with this. I mean, I'll read a part. No, I'm not going to. I'm going to edit this bit out. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I was unsure of what to expect going into it, but I didn't expect any 10% of what happened. So the story follows Jess, who's a waitress in LA. She's struggling to sort of make it as an actress there. And it's just from minute one, you're into it. And it's just fast paced as hell. And it's just a non-stop ride all the way through to the end. Now I have a horrible fear of like knives and syringes and stuff, and like the opening scene of this had me cringing reading it on the bus on my way to work at about 7 a.m. And I think it took me about a half an hour bus journey to get through 10 pages of it. It was nauseating for me. So it starts off with Jess pricking her finger on a used syringe in this grim, dank bathroom in the diner that she works in overnight, which is already just and it just explores far too much detail, Jess's thoughts about it and the mindset and the panic, and it's just I hated it. I enjoyed it, but I hated it as well. That was truly Payneful Pages, that was for sure. But then when she gets home, she finds a sort of 5-year-old boy, what turned out to be 5-year-old, sort of outside in the garden of her apartment block that she lives in. She takes him in, and then from there it's just chaos, complete chaos all the way through to the end. Twists, bizarrities, is that a word? Bizarreness, just so much crazy stuff happens all the way through. And a lot of the story is sort of around relationship between a child and their father. Not necessarily just the child and father in the story, but just overall the relationship there, especially with a father that's like either absent or is sort of viewed as a monster in the eyes of the child. I won't say anything more on that, but if you've read it, you kind of know what I mean by that sentence. And it's really good. It's really, really good. I'd also give this one 5-star for sure. There's not much else to say about it. I'm trying to not go into as much in any detail at all about any of these books because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. And you know, if you haven't read it, I'd 100% recommend this. I'd recommend all of the ones on here, but this one for sure. This is one that was like, I don't know how quickly I finished it, but it, outside of that first scene, it was just, you couldn't put it down. You couldn't put it down. And the ending was good, which is sometimes difficult. But I enjoyed the ending of this for sure, so I'd 100% recommend it. So yeah, that is my top books of 2025, 5/6 if you count Bird Box, Mallory, and 2 books, which they are. And obviously, they had a bit of a 2024 one in there as well. But yeah, you know, I really, really enjoyed my sort of year coming back to reading. I'm going to put up a video, hopefully at some point, on my plans for 2026. I've got a sort of bit of a list of things that I want to read, but I'm also going to do not overall manga, but do my sort of top 5 maybe Junji Ito stories. The ones stood up vertically are ones I read. The ones laying flat horizontally are the ones I've still got to read. So I've still got quite a bit to work through. But I do want to start putting something like that together as well. So yeah, I don't want to exclusively focus on just horror books. I do want to do horror manga and just manga in general. But yeah, you know, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you agree with the books that I put on? Do you disagree with them? Is there any of them that you've read that you don't feel are that great? But also let me know some of your favourite, you know, top 3, top 5 books, especially horror of the year. I'm always going to look for recommendations as well, which is also one of the reasons why I sort of made the channel, was to not only share my thoughts, but also maybe get some recommendations off people and things like that. I watch, you know, quite a lot of booktubers, but sometimes the comments are a really nice place to get some book recommendations to put on the TBR pile. So yeah, you know, there's probably not the highest quality video. The first one, apologies if the audio quality is not great. I'm going to fill this background at some point soon, so it's not just a white wall. And I have been a bit incoherent at times, but you know, apologies. It will take some getting used to. But yeah, if you did enjoy this, you made it all the way through to the end, you know, liking the video would be really, really appreciated. If you want to subscribe to sort of see how I get on with doing this, then you know, that would also be really appreciated.